There are days in your life that you just know you will remember forever, not because something grand happened, but because of the quiet way your heart broke. For me, that day was my 65th birthday. The sun rose like any other day, casting long shadows across my quiet living room. I made my tea the same way I had for 40 years, but my hands were shaking just a little, because all I was waiting for was the phone to ring. All I wanted was to hear his voice just for a minute wishing me a happy birthday, but the call never came. I waited until the cake I'd bought for myself went stale on the counter. I waited until the sun went down and the room was dark. And that's when I cried, not loud sobs but quiet tears that just wouldn't stop. I cried alone on my birthday because my son, my only child, never called. Before I continue with my story, if you understand this kind of quiet heartache, if you've ever waited for a call that didn't come, then you're in the right place. This channel is for stories just like this one. If this video touches you, please consider subscribing to the channel. Your support helps me share more voices, more real-life stories. Now, let me take you back to the beginning, to where my story truly started. My name is Anya. For most of my life I was just a mother. That was my greatest title, my proudest role. My son, Leo, was my entire world. His father, my dear husband Mark, passed away when Leo was only 10. After that it was just the two of us against everything. I worked 2 jobs sometimes, my bones aching with tiredness, just to make sure he had school books, a warm coat, the chance to go on a school trip. I never regretted a single moment of it. Seeing him smile, hearing him say, "Love you, Mum," was all the payment I ever needed. He was a good boy, thoughtful. He'd make me cards for Mother's Day long after other kids had stopped. He'd call me from university just to tell me about a grade he got. We were a team, a tiny, unbreakable family of 2. I remember the first time he brought Maya home. His eyes shone with a light I hadn't seen before. She was beautiful, sharp, ambitious. She came from a different world than ours, one of business dinners and vacation homes. I could see she loved Leo, but I also saw the way her eyes quietly judged our small, worn-out sofa, my collection of photo frames from the discount store. I pushed that feeling down. I wanted my son to be happy. If he loved her, I would love her too. I welcomed her with open arms, cooking her favorite foods, trying to remember the names of the designers she mentioned. The wedding was a blur of beauty and expense, far beyond what I could ever have afforded. Leo held my hand tight during the mother-son dance. "Thank you for everything, Mum," he whispered. "My new life starts today, but you'll always be in it." I believed him. With all my heart, I believed him. The change was so slow, like watching the tide go out, grain of sand by grain of sand. At first it was just business. He had a demanding new job, she was launching her own company. Our weekly Sunday calls became every other week. Then they became short, 10-minute check-ins, always with the sound of typing or television in the background. "Gotta go, Mum, things are crazy here, love you." I'd smile and say, "I love you more," but I'd be left holding a silent phone, the emptiness of my flat settling around me again. Then the visits changed. Maya would suggest fancy restaurants where the prices on the menu made my breath catch. I'd order the cheapest salad, feeling out of place. Conversations turned to their new friends, their investments, their plans to travel to places I'd only seen on TV. My stories about my garden or Mrs. Henderson's new cat from next door would land in the conversation with a quiet thud, followed by a polite smile and a swift change of subject. I started to feel like a visitor. A guest from a past life who didn't quite speak the new language. The first real crack, the one I should have paid more attention to, happened about a year after the wedding. I was at their new apartment, a beautiful, minimalist space that felt more like a magazine photo than a home. Leo was showing me the view. Maya was in the kitchen. I made a simple, silly comment. I said, "Leo, this place is wonderful, but it needs a splash of color. I could knit you one of my throw blankets for this sofa." It was an offering, a piece of me, of our old home. Maya walked in holding a sleek glass of water. She gave a light laugh. "Oh, Anya, that's sweet, but it wouldn't really match our aesthetic. We're going for a very curated look." She said it kindly, but the word aesthetic felt like a wall. Leo just put an arm around her and smiled at me. "Mum's blankets are cozy, babe, but you're right, maybe not for here." He wasn't unkind. He was just agreeing with his wife. And for the first time, I felt myself being gently edited out of his new, curated life. Time has a way of moving forward, even when your heart wants to pause. Months turned into a year, then 2. I became an expert in minimizing myself. I learned not to offer advice unless asked directly. I learned to talk less about my simple life and listen more to the epic saga of their careers and social calendar. My role was shrinking, and I accepted it, thinking this was just what happened. Your children grow up, they build new families and you take a step back. It's the natural order of things, but a quiet voice inside me wondered if it had to feel quite so much like being erased. I tried to bridge the gap. I signed up for a class at the community center to learn how to use a smartphone better, just so I could text him properly and maybe see pictures on something called Instagram. I saw photos there, photos of them at brunch with friends I'd never met, on hiking trips I didn't know he enjoyed. He looked happy, truly happy, and I was happy for him. But a tiny, selfish part of me ached, wondering why I was now only a spectator to his joy, and no longer a part of it. Then Maya got pregnant. When Leo called to tell me, his voice was choked with tears of happiness. My own heart soared, a grandchild, a new precious life to love. This was my chance, I thought. This could bring us close again. I offered everything. I said I could help prepare the nursery, I could cook freezer meals for after the birth, I could come and stay to help in those first sleepless weeks. That's so kind of you, Mum, Leo said, but his voice had that familiar, distracted tone. We'll see. Maya's mum is already planning to fly over for the first month, and we've booked a postpartum doula. But we'll definitely need you later. Maya's mother, Elena, she was a force of nature. Where I was hesitant, she was decisive. Where I offered, she arranged. She flew in from across the country a week before the due date and took command. When my beautiful grandson, Samuel, was born, I visited the hospital. I held that perfect sleeping baby, my tears falling onto his blanket. Maya was tired but glowing, propped up in bed. Elena was there, organizing flowers, speaking to the nurses with confident authority. Anya dear, could you pass me that bag? No, the grey one. Yes, that's it. I felt like an assistant in the most important moment of my life. The first months of Sam's life were a pattern I grew to dread. I would take the long bus ride across town to visit, always calling first to make sure it was a good time. I'd arrive with a homemade pie or a tiny knitted hat. Elena was often there, usually giving instructions on the correct way to burp the baby or commenting on the organic baby food they'd ordered. My contributions felt clumsy and outdated next to hers. One afternoon I was gently rocking Sam, singing a lullaby I used to sing to Leo. Maya walked in and smiled, but it was a tight smile. Anya, we're trying not to establish a rocking to sleep association. The sleep consultant says it can create dependencies. She gently took Sam from my arms and placed him in his crib, where he promptly began to cry. He'll self-soothe, she said, more to herself than to me. I just stood there, my arms feeling painfully empty. Leo was always at work or tired or on his phone. Our conversations became logistical. Hi Mum, can you pick up this specific brand of diaper on your way over? Or Mum, the pediatrician said no homemade purees until 6 months, so maybe don't bring the applesauce. I was a task on a list, not his mother. The warmth was being replaced by efficiency. I started leaving their house with a heavy heart, a feeling of being utterly superfluous. I was grandma, but I was a version of grandma that came with a manual I hadn't been given, and I was failing the test. My own life felt smaller and quieter in contrast. My friends would ask about my grandson, and I'd show them pictures, my pride feeling like a cover for a deep sadness. You're so lucky to live nearby, they'd say. I'd nod and smile, but inside I thought, what good is being nearby if you feel 1,000,000 miles away? The invitations for Sunday dinners, which had already become rare, stopped altogether. Holidays were now hosted by Maya's family, or they'd take a trip. It's just easier with the baby, Mum, Leo would explain. The drive to you is long and we have so much gear to pack. I understood. Of course I understood. But understanding something and feeling it are two very different oceans. My little flat, once filled with the chaos and love of raising a boy, was now a museum of silence. I'd look at the photos on the wall. Leo as a gap-toothed 7-year-old, Leo in his graduation gown, and the man in those pictures felt like a stranger to the busy, polite son I now knew. And so my birthday approached, my 65th. It felt like a milestone. Leo had never missed a birthday before. Even at university he'd send a funny card or call. I told myself not to expect much, they were so busy with the baby. But a foolish, hopeful part of me, the part that was still just Mum, dreamed of a surprise. Maybe they'd show up at my door. Maybe he'd call first thing in the morning. Maybe, just maybe, for one day I would feel like I was still important. The morning of my birthday dawned bright and clear. I dressed with a little more care. I put the kettle on, and I waited. The phone was silent. By noon the hope began to curdle into worry. Was he okay? Was Sam sick? I fought the urge to call him. I didn't want to be a burden, to seem like I was demanding attention, so I waited. I watched the clock. Each tick was a little hammer on my heart. I finally broke down and sent a simple text in the afternoon. Hello my dear, thinking of you, hope you're having a good day. An hour later my phone buzzed, my heart leapt. It was a message from Leo. It wasn't a call, it was just text on a screen. It read, "Hi Mum, crazy day here, Sam, been fussy and we're swamped with work. Talk soon, happy birthday." Talk soon, 2 words that meant nothing. Happy birthday, tacked on at the end like an afterthought. I read it again and again. The digital cheerfulness of it was like a knife. He'd remembered. He'd typed the words, but he hadn't called. He hadn't made the time to hear my voice. That was the moment the last thread of my hope snapped. The silence in my flat wasn't just quiet, it was a verdict. I was alone. The week after my birthday passed in a kind of slow-motion haze. The world outside my window carried on, cars passed, neighbors walked their dogs, the sun rose and set. But inside I felt frozen. That text message glowed in my mind, a cold, blue reminder, happy birthday. It wasn't anger I felt. It was something deeper and much quieter. It was a final, sad understanding, the understanding that I had been moved to a new category in my son's life. I was no longer an active participant. I was a footnote, a polite, occasional obligation. I didn't call him out on it. What would I say? You hurt my feelings. It sounded so small, so childish, even to me. He was a grown man with a family and a demanding career. My lonely birthday was my own problem to manage, so I tried to manage it. I threw away the stale cake. I put the birthday card I'd bought for myself, the one I'd hoped he'd sign, in a drawer. I tidied my flat until it was spotless, as if I could tidy away the hurt. But a shift had happened. A calm, weary resolve settled over me. The constant anxiety of waiting for his call, of measuring my words, of trying to fit into the margins of his life, it simply evaporated. It was replaced by a profound tiredness. I realized I had been holding my breath for years, and I finally had to let it out. Leo called 10 days later on a Sunday evening. His voice was bright, casual. "Hey Mum, sorry things have been nuts, how are you? How was your birthday?" There was a long pause on my end. I could hear Sam babbling in the background, the clink of dishes, life bustling and full on the other end of the line. My own silence felt vast. "Mum's you there?" "I'm here, Leo," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "My birthday was quiet." "Yeah, sorry again about that. We'll make it up to you. Maybe we can do a lunch next weekend." It was the usual script, the postponed plan, the vague promise, and for the first time I didn't rush to accept it, to soothe him, to say it was all okay. "Leo," I began, my heart pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure, shoot." "Do you remember your 10th birthday?" I asked. There was a slight pause. Vaguely, I think I had a football cake." "You did," I said, a small smile touching my lips despite the ache. "You, broken your arm 2 weeks before, trying to ride your bike down the steps at the park. You were so upset you wouldn't be able to play in your party game, so I learned all the rules to every board game you owned. We spent the whole party playing Monopoly and Scrabble, and I let you win every single time. Your friends thought it was brilliant." He gave a soft laugh. "I think I remember that. You were always good at that stuff." "And do you remember what you said to me after all your friends had gone home?" I continued, my voice dropping to a whisper. "You were half asleep, your head in my lap. You said, 'Mum, when I'm a grown-up, I'm going to buy you a big house and we'll play games every day.'" The line went very quiet. The background noise seemed to fade away. "Leo," I said, the words coming now from a place of pure, unedited truth. "I don't need a big house. I never did. All I've ever needed was to be your mum. And I don't know how to be that anymore. I don't know where I fit." The silence that followed was different from all the others. It wasn't the silence of distraction. It was the silence of being heard. It was thick and heavy. "Mum," he started, his voice strained. "What are you saying? Of course you're my mum." "I know I am in name," I said gently. "But being a mother isn't a title you retire from. It's a place in someone's life, and I feel like I've been evicted from that place. Slowly and with the best intentions, maybe, but evicted all the same." "That's not true," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. It was defensive, the sound of someone confronted with a truth they've been avoiding. "It's how I feel, son," I said. "On my birthday I waited for your call all day, and you sent a text, Leo. It felt like I was a reminder on a to-do list you'd already checked off." "I was busy, Sam was sick, work was hell." "I know," I interrupted, not unkindly. "I know you were busy. I have spent my whole life knowing you would be busy. When you were a baby, I was busy. When you were a teenager, I was busy working 2 jobs. But I was never too busy for you, not once." The words hung in the air between us, a stark, undeniable contrast. He didn't speak for a long time. I could almost hear him thinking, shuffling through memories, seeing the pattern I had been living with for years. Mum, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything right now, I said, a wave of exhaustion washing over me. I didn't tell you this to make you feel guilty. I told you because I can't carry this quiet hurt anymore. I love you, Leo. I love Maya and Sam more than I can say. But I need to learn how to live in my own life again, not just wait on the edges of yours. Are you saying you don't want to see us? He asked, and for the first time I heard a crack of fear in his voice. No, my darling boy, I said, tears finally spilling over. I'm saying I need to see you differently, and I need you to want to see me too, not out of duty, but out of love, and I'm not sure you remember the difference right now. I told him I was tired and that we should both think. We ended the call not with anger, but with a profound, aching sadness. I had done it. I had laid my heart on the table with all its fragile, broken pieces. I didn't know if he would pick them up or if he would just walk away from the mess. The days that followed were the hardest. The silence returned, but this time it was a chosen silence full of consequence. I didn't reach out. I went for long walks. I visited Mark's grave and talked to him for an hour. I started knitting a blanket, not for Leek's sofa, but for my own. I was rebuilding the walls of my own world, brick by quiet brick. I was preparing myself for the possibility that the phone might never ring again with the warmth I longed for. And in that preparation, I found a sliver of strength. The strength of a woman who had finally stopped waiting and had decided, heartbreakingly, to begin living without expectation. For 2 weeks the silence held. It was a thick, tangible thing in my flat. I had grown used to the quiet before, but this was different. This was a silence I had chosen, a line I had drawn, and while it was lonely, it was also clean. There was no more waiting, no more listening for the phone with a hopeful dread. The ache was still there, a constant companion, but it was an honest ache. I wasn't hiding it from myself anymore. I kept busy. I really did finish that blanket, a stormy grey and blue thing that was far from the bright colours I once imagined for their modern sofa. It was for me. I joined a gardening club at the community centre, something I'd always put off because, what if Leo needs me on a Saturday? I planted winter pansies in a window box, their little faces brave against the chill. I had tea with Mrs. Henderson from next door and actually listened to the long story about her cat. I began to remember who Anya was, outside of being Leo's mother. Then one rainy Tuesday afternoon my doorbell rang. It wasn't the postman, he had already come. My heart, traitorous thing, gave a hard thump. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door and there he was. Leo stood on the doormat, soaked from the rain. He hadn't brought an umbrella. He was alone, no Maya, no Sam, no diaper bag. He just stood there looking at me, and he looked younger and lost, like the little boy who had come home once with a lost football, shoulders slumped. "Hi, Mum," he said, his voice rough. "Leo," I breathed, stepping back automatically. "Come in, you're drenched." He stepped into the hall, water dripping from his coat onto the floorboards. He didn't move to take it off. He just stood there, shifting his weight. The familiar sight of him in my small hallway felt both comforting and terribly strange. I tried to call," he said, not meeting my eyes. I picked up the phone a dozen times, but I didn't know what to say, so I thought I had to come. "Let me get you a towel," I said, turning towards the linen cupboard, needing something to do. "No, wait." His hand, cold and damp, gently caught my wrist. I stopped. "Please." I turned back to him. He finally looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes undid me. It was regret, clear and deep and swimming in tears he was fighting to hold back. "I'm sorry," he whispered. The words were so simple, but they carried the weight of years. "Mum, I am so sorry." He broke then. A sob racked his frame, and he crumpled not to the floor but into himself, his face in his hands. I didn't hesitate. In an instant I was there. I wrapped my arms around my tall, grown-up son as he cried, pulling his wet head to my shoulder. I held him as I hadn't held him since he was a boy, rocking him slightly, making soft, shushing sounds. He cried for a long time, great heaving sobs that spoke of a pressure released. When the storm subsided into shaky breaths, I led him to the kitchen. I sat him down at the old wooden table, the same one we'd done his homework on, and made him a strong, sweet tea. I handed him a towel. He rubbed his face, looking exhausted and raw. "I've been a terrible son," he said, his voice hollow. "No," I said firmly, sitting across from him. "You haven't been terrible, you've been absent, there's a difference. A terrible son would mean you were cruel. You weren't cruel, you were just gone." "Maybe that's worse," he said, staring into his mug. After Dad died, it was always you and me. You were my rock. And then I got a new life and I put the rock down. I didn't mean to leave it behind. I just got distracted carrying all these new things. Maya, the job, the baby, the image of the perfect life we were supposed to have. He shook his head. I thought I was doing the right thing, building a strong, independent family. I thought including you too much would be clinging, or that it would make Maya feel like I was choosing you over her. Did she ever say that? I asked gently. No, never, not in words. But there were little comments, sighs, the way she changed the subject when I talked about my childhood. I felt this pressure to prove that my new family was my first priority. And in trying to prove it to her, I ended up proving it to you in the worst way. I made you feel like you were last. He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed. That text on your birthday, Mum, I wrote it while I was in a work meeting. I sent it and immediately forgot about it. It was a task, and you were right. You've never made me feel like a task, not once. Hearing him say it, seeing the genuine horror on his face as he realized it, was a balm to a wound I thought would never heal. It didn't erase the hurt, but it gave it meaning. It wasn't because he didn't love me. It was because he was lost too. What now, Leo? I asked softly. I don't know, he admitted, but I want to find a way back. I don't want my son to grow up not knowing his grandma. I don't want to be the man who forgets his mother. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine. It was warm now. I can't promise I'll get it right straight away, but I promise I will try, really try. That was all I had ever needed. Not perfection, not a starring role, just the effort, just the knowledge that I still mattered. I can work with trying, I said, squeezing his hand. We talked for hours, not about schedules or baby routines, but about real things. He talked about the stress of his job, the fear he felt being a father, the pressure he put on himself. I listened, and then I told him about my loneliness, not to guilt him but so he would understand. I told him about the silent birthday, about watching the clock. He listened, and this time he didn't make excuses. He just let my words settle in. He didn't stay for dinner. He said he needed to go home and talk to Maya. This isn't just about us, Mum, he said. I need to fix things on my end too. I need to be a better bridge, not a wall. I walked him to the door. The rain had stopped, leaving the world washed clean. He hugged me tight, a proper hug, the kind that lasts. Thank you, he whispered into my hair. For what? For finally telling me I was hurting you, for not letting me get away with it anymore. I kissed his cheek. Go home to your family, son. I watched him walk down the path to his car. The weight in my chest wasn't gone, but it had shifted. It was no longer the heavy stone of despair. It was the lighter, though still uncertain, weight of a seed of something new, waiting to see if it would grow. The quiet after Leo's visit felt different. It was no longer the silence of an ending, but the quiet of a field after a storm, soaked, messy, but with the potential for new growth. I didn't hear from him the next day or the day after, but strangely I felt less anxiety about it. He had said he needed to talk to Maya. That was important. For the first time I wasn't waiting for a call, I was respecting a process. It was 4 days later when my phone rang. The name that flashed on the screen wasn't Leo's, it was Maya's. My breath caught. This was uncharted territory. We'd never spoken on the phone, just the two of us, not once. I answered, "Hello, Maya." "Hi, Anya." Her voice was measured, polite, but softer than I was used to. "I hope it's okay that I'm calling." "Of course it is," I said, sitting down at my kitchen table, bracing myself. "Leo and I have been talking, a lot." She paused and I could hear her choosing her words carefully. "He told me about your conversation, about everything, and I wanted to call you myself." A part of me tightened, preparing for defensiveness, for a polite version of "you're causing trouble in my marriage," but it didn't come. "First," she continued, "I am so sorry about your birthday. That was unforgivable, and I am sorry for my part in the distance that's grown between us." I was stunned into silence. This was not what I had expected. "You don't have anything to apologize for, Maya," I finally managed. "But I do," she said, and her voice gained a little strength. "I think I got so caught up in doing everything the right way, the perfect mother, the perfect home, the perfect family dynamic, that I forgot what makes a family in the first place. It's not a checklist, it's people." She let out a small, shaky sigh. "I saw Leo's relationship with you as something from his past. I think, in my head, I was trying to help him build this shiny new future, and I didn't see that I was asking him to leave pieces of his heart behind to do it. Pieces like you." Her honesty was disarming. It stripped away any lingering resentment I held. She wasn't a villain. She was a young woman trying her best who had made a very human mistake. Thank you for saying that, Maya. It means more than you know. Leo is heartbroken, Anya, truly. He loves you so much, he's just been on autopilot, and I've been his co-pilot navigating us in the wrong direction. She took a deep breath. We would like to come over, all three of us, not for a formal visit, just to be if you'd have us. The tears that came this time were warm, a release of a pressure I hadn't fully known I was holding. I would love that, I said, my voice thick. When? Would Saturday be okay? We could bring lunch. Saturday, 2 days away. Saturday is perfect. When Saturday arrived, I was nervous. I didn't clean obsessively. I just made the flat feel warm, a fire in the hearth, the grey-blue blanket on my chair, the smell of fresh coffee. I wore my comfortable clothes. I decided to just be myself, Anya, not a version of a grandma I thought I should be. The doorbell rang. I opened it and there they were. Leo holding a bag of food, his eyes searching mine anxiously. Maya with Sam on her hip. Sam was bigger now, a proper toddler with curious eyes. Hi, Mum, Leo said, the words full of unspoken hope. Come in, I smiled, stepping back. The visit was awkward for the first 10 minutes. We were all trying too hard. Leo was overly cheerful. Maya was unusually quiet. Sam was the one who broke the ice. He wriggled to get down, and once on his feet, he toddled unsteadily towards my bookshelf, fascinated by a colourful pottery owl I'd had for years. Oh, careful, Sam, Maya started, but I held up a hand. It's fine, I said softly. It's not precious. I went and sat on the floor near him. He picked up the owl, examined it, then turned and held it out to me, babbling. Owls, I said gently. It's an owl, hoo-hoo. Sam giggled. Oa, he repeated, and plopped down into my lap, owl clutched tightly. That simple act, his small, trusting weight in my lap, dissolved the tension in the room. I looked up at Leo and Maya. Leo had tears in his eyes. Maya was smiling, a real, unguarded smile. We ate lunch on the floor around the coffee table, a picnic in the living room. Sam smeared humus on his face and my rug, and for the first time Maya didn't rush to clean it. She just laughed. We talked, really talked. Leo told a silly story about a disaster at work. I told a story about Leo as a boy getting his head stuck in the stair banisters. Maya listened, her laughter ringing out, and she asked questions. What was he like in school? What were his favourite foods? I saw it then. She wasn't just tolerating my stories about his past. She was interested. She wanted to know the boy who became the man she loved. And I realised I wanted to know the woman he loved, not as my son's wife, but as Maya. The afternoon melted away. When it was time for Sam's nap, they started to pack up. Leo helped me clear the plates. In the kitchen, he put a hand on my shoulder. Thank you, Mum, he said quietly. For what? You brought the food. For letting us in, for not giving up on me. As they were leaving, Maya hugged me. It wasn't a polite, one-armed hug. It was a proper, full embrace. Thank you, Anya, she whispered. Let's do this again soon. Maybe you could come to us next time. I'd love for you to see Sam's room. I would love that, I said, and I meant it. I closed the door and leaned against it. The flat was quiet again, but it held the echoes of laughter, of babbling, of connection. The seed that had been planted was pushing through the soil. It was tender and green and it needed care, but it was alive. The following week Leo called, just to chat. He told me about a funny thing Sam had done. He asked about my gardening club. The call lasted 20 minutes, and when we hung up I didn't feel empty. I felt full. A new rhythm began, slow and gentle. A video call with Sam every few days. A visit every other weekend, sometimes at my place, sometimes at theirs. The visits at their house were different now. Maya would hand me Sam and say, "You two go play," and she'd make tea. I'd sit on their expensive, curated rug, building block towers with my grandson, and I no longer felt like I was intruding. I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. A part of the tapestry, not a stain on it. One day Maya asked me for my recipe for the lentil soup Leo always talked about. He says mine is never quite right, she said, rolling her eyes but smiling. I went over and we made it together in her kitchen. It was a simple act, passing on a family recipe. But as we stood side by side, chopping vegetables, it felt like a sacrament. A passing of the torch, not of authority, but of love. I was being woven back into the fabric of their family, not as the central figure, but as a vital, cherished thread. And I learned that this new pattern, though different from the one I'd known, was perhaps more beautiful because it was chosen by all of us. Seasons changed. The winter pansies in my window box gave way to spring tulips, and then to the bright geraniums of summer. Time, which had once felt so heavy and slow, began to move with a gentle, forward momentum. The new rhythm of our lives wasn't perfect. Life never is, but it was real. It was built on something sturdier than obligation. It was built on conscious choice. I learned to use the video call feature on my phone with confidence. Sam's face would light up the screen, and he'd shout, "Garma," in his sweet, garbled way. We'd have conversations about his toy cars, or he'd show me a scribbled drawing. Sometimes, Leah would be in the background waving, or Maya would pop her head in to say a quick hello before heading to a meeting. I was no longer an event they had to schedule. I was a presence in their daily life, however small. The visits became the anchor of my month. Sometimes I'd take the bus to their place. Other times they'd pile into the car and come to me. My small flat, once a museum of silence, became a place of joyful noise again. Toys accumulated in a basket in the corner. A sippy cup lived permanently in my kitchen cupboard. These weren't signs of clutter, they were trophies of belonging. One Saturday, Leo came over alone. Maya was at a yoga class and Sam was with a friend for a playdate. It was just the two of us, like old times. We sat in the garden with mugs of tea. "It's peaceful out here," he said, looking at my modest patch of green. "It is," I agreed. "It's my little sanctuary." He was quiet for a moment, turning his mug in his hands. "Mum, I've been thinking a lot lately, about Dad, about how you were after he died." The mention of Mark, so long gone but never forgotten, brought its usual soft pang. "What about it?" I think I never really processed it. I was a kid, you were my rock, so I just clung to you. And then when I grew up and started my own family, I think I had this subconscious idea that to be strong for them I couldn't need you anymore, that needing you was a weakness or a sign I wasn't fully committed to my new life. He looked at me, his eyes clear and sad. It was so stupid. Needing the people who love you isn't a weakness, it's what makes a life rich. His words touched a deep, tender place in my soul. He wasn't just apologizing anymore, he was understanding. He was seeing the patterns of his own heart. "I think I was afraid of needing you too, Lee," I admitted. "After you left home, my whole purpose was wrapped up in being your mother. When you needed me less, I felt obsolete. And instead of telling you I was lonely, I tried to make myself smaller and quieter, hoping that would make me easier to love. We both got it so wrong." He reached over and took my hand. "We're figuring it out now." That conversation was a cornerstone. It moved us from a fragile peace to a solid understanding. We weren't just going through the motions of reconciliation, we were actively building a new relationship, adult to adult, with all the history and love of mother and son as its foundation. My relationship with Maya deepened in its own way. It became less of a negotiation and more of a genuine connection. She started calling me for advice, not just about Leo or Sam, but about things in her own life, a problem with a colleague, a decision about her business. She valued my perspective not as an expert, but as a woman who had lived a long life and seen a few things. I learned to offer my thoughts only when asked, and she learned to receive them not as criticism, but as love. One afternoon, she brought Sam over and she looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her shoulders tense. "Rough week?" I asked, taking Sam as he launched himself at me. "The worst," she sighed, sinking into my sofa. "Leo, been travelling, work is insane, and Sam, been teething and up all night. I feel like I'm failing at everything." I made her a cup of tea, sat beside her and simply said, "You're not failing, you're just in a hard season, and it's okay to say it's hard." She looked at me and her composure cracked just a little. "My own mother just tells me to hire more help or meditate. She doesn't get it." "Sometimes," I said softly, "you don't need solutions. You just need someone to sit in the mess with you for a minute." She nodded, tears welling up, and sipped her tea. We sat in comfortable silence while Sam played at our feet. In that moment I wasn't her mother-in-law, I was her ally. It was a gift I hadn't known I could receive. The biggest surprise came on Mother's Day. In the past few years it had been a day of polite gestures, a card in the post, a quick call. This year they arrived at my door in the morning, all three of them. Leo carried a beautiful pot of lavender. Maya held a handmade card from Sam, covered in glittery, chaotic fingerprints, and Sam himself held out a small, clumsily wrapped package. "We wanted to do it properly," Leo said. Inside the package was a simple, beautiful picture frame, and in it was not a new photo but an old one. It was a picture of me, much younger, laughing with a 5-year-old Leo on my back, both of us grinning at the camera. Underneath it, in Leo's handwriting, it said, "Then, now, always, we remember." I cried, of course, but they were the sweetest tears. They weren't tears of loneliness or loss. They were tears of being seen, fully and completely. They were honoring the mother I had been, and welcoming the grandmother and woman I was now. That evening, after they'd gone home and the quiet returned, I looked at that photo on my mantelpiece. I realized something profound. The love I had feared was lost hadn't disappeared. It had just been buried under busyness, misunderstanding, and fear. It had taken a silent birthday, a courageous conversation, and a lot of humility to dig it back up. But there it was, tarnished in places, perhaps, but stronger for having been tested. It was no longer a love that took itself for granted. It was a love that had been chosen again, day by day, visit by visit, honest word by honest word. The year rolled on, bringing with it the ordinary, precious markers of time. Sam's second birthday was celebrated in my garden with a simple tea party, the lavender they'd given me blooming purple and fragrant in the background. I watched Leo blow up balloons, his face flushed with the effort, and Maya carefully place candles on a cake. I held Sam on my lap as he clumsily tried to tear wrapping paper, his laughter like bells on the air. I was present. Not as a spectator but as a participant, my hands dusted with cake crumbs, my heart full of a quiet, deep joy. It was in these ordinary moments that I found myself reflecting the most. The sharp pain of the forgotten birthday had faded, but its memory remained, not as a wound but as a teacher. It had been the catalyst that forced us all to stop and look at what we were building, or rather, what we were neglecting. One evening I was looking through an old photo album, the kind with sticky plastic pages and fading colours. There was a picture of me, younger than Maya is now, looking utterly exhausted but smiling with a sleeping baby Leo in my arms. I remembered that exhaustion, the bone-deep tiredness of early motherhood. But I also remembered the village, however small. Mrs. Robbins from 3 doors down, who would sometimes take Leo for an hour so I could shower. My own mother, who would send letters with £5 notes tucked inside. It wasn't much, but it was a net. A fragile human net of connection that said, "You are not alone in this." I realized that in our modern world, in our quest for curated perfection and self-sufficiency, we had dismantled that net. Maya, with all her best intentions and Google searches, was trying to build a flawless solo act. Leo, wanting to be the perfect modern husband and father, thought supporting her meant closing the circle tight, keeping outsiders, even his own mother, at bay. And I, from my generation that was taught not to be a burden, had stepped back too willingly, interpreting their busyness as a rejection. My lonely birthday wasn't just about a missed call. It was the symptom of a much bigger silence, a silence where assumptions replaced conversations, where image replaced intimacy, where love was presumed but not practiced. The lesson I began to see wasn't just for Leo. It was for all of us. It was for me. I learned that love requires voice. It requires saying, "I miss you," or "This hurt me," or "I need you." It is vulnerable and it is brave. My years of silent suffering of making myself smaller did not preserve our bond. It almost dissolved it. It was only when I found the courage to speak my heart's quiet truth that the healing could begin. I also learned about forgiveness, not as a single grand event but as a daily practice. There were still moments that strung, a forgotten plan, a conversation where I felt the old dynamic creep in. But now, instead of letting the hurt fester in silence, I had learned to say gently, that felt a bit like the old days, "Can we try again?" And Leo or Maya would pause and listen, and we would reset. Forgiveness became the oil in the engine of our new relationship, preventing the gears from seizing up with old resentments. Most importantly, I learned about the evolution of a mother's love. For so long I believed being a mother meant being at the center of my child's universe. When I was no longer at that center, I thought I had failed or that I was no longer needed. I was wrong. A mother's love doesn't diminish when it steps back, it transforms. It becomes a steady light from the shore as their ship sails into new waters. It is the safe harbor they can return to, not out of duty, but out of desire. My role was no longer to be his everything, but to be a part of his everyone, a constant, loving presence in the beautiful, complicated mosaic of his own family. One autumn day I was at their house reading a story to Sam before his nap. He was warm and heavy against me, his breathing slowing. Maya peeked in, saw us and smiled. "He always settles best for you," she whispered. It was a simple comment, but it held a world of meaning. It wasn't a competition. It was a recognition of a unique bond. My way, the old-fashioned way of rocking and singing, had found its place alongside her way, the way of sleep schedules and consultants. There was room for both. As I left that day, Leo walked me to my car. The air was crisp, smelling of wood smoke and fallen leaves. "You know, Mum," he said, shoving his hands in his pockets, "I'm almost grateful for that awful birthday." I looked at him surprised. "Not for the hurt it caused you," he said quickly. "Never for that, but for the wake-up call. I was sleepwalking through my life, through my most important relationships. That day, your silence after it was the alarm clock I didn't know I needed. It shook me awake." I nodded, understanding. Sometimes the greatest gifts are wrapped in the roughest paper. The pain had been real, but so was the growth it sparked. We had all been shaken awake. Driving home, the setting sun painting the sky in streaks of gold and violet, I felt a profound sense of peace. The story wasn't a fairy tale with a happily ever after where everything was perfect. It was better than that. It was real. It was messy, it was flawed, and it was enduring. We had looked our neglect in the eye, named it, and chose to build something different. And what we were building now had the strength of tested materials: honesty, forgiveness, and a love that was no longer afraid to speak its name. And so here we are. My story, from the silent tears on a stale birthday cake to the noisy, glitter-filled joy of a toddler's hug, finds its resting place not in an ending, but in a gentle continuity. Life, in its wisdom, doesn't give us neat finishes. It gives us seasons. We had our long winter of distance. Now we are in a careful, grateful spring. My flat is still quiet for much of the time, but the quiet is different. It is no longer empty. It is filled with the echoes of recent laughter, the promise of the next visit, the memory of a small hand in mine. The photo of young me and Leo sits on my mantel, a testament to where we began. Next to it now sits a new photo, from Sam's birthday, of the four of us, my son's arm around my shoulders, my daughter-in-law's head leaning lightly against his, and my grandson blissfully cake-smeared in my arms. Then and now, a circle not broken but widened. Do Leo and I talk every day? No, and that's okay. The calls we have are real. They are not squeezed in between meetings. He calls when he's walking to get his lunch just to tell me a funny thought he had, or I'll send a picture of the first rose in my garden and he'll reply with a heart. It's small, but it's constant. It's a thread that connects our daily lives, simple and strong. Maya and I have found our rhythm. We text about silly things, beautiful things, difficult things. She sends me pictures of Sam's artwork, and I send her pictures of clouds that look like animals. We have built a bridge, woman to woman, and we walk across it often. It can hold the weight of both joy and worry. And Sam, my beautiful Sam, he is the living, breathing proof that love can begin again in new forms. He knows me. He runs to me with his arms wide open. In his eyes, I am not a complicated history or a delicate dynamic. I am simply Garma, a source of cookies, silly songs, and endless patience for stacking blocks. In loving him, I have learned to love the man his father has become, and the woman who is his mother, in a deeper, more generous way. This journey taught me that the deepest family dramas are not about loud fights and slammed doors. They are about the silent spaces between words, the assumptions that grow like weeds, the love that goes unspoken until it almost withers. Our salvation was not in a grand gesture, but in a series of small, courageous choices. My choice to speak, Leek's choice to listen and truly hear, Maya's choice to understand and include. If you take anything from my story, let it be this: do not be afraid of the honest conversation, the one that trembles on your lips. Say the kind but difficult thing: I miss you, I need you, that hurt me. It is the most terrifying and the most loving gift you can give. It plants a flag in the ground of your relationship and says, this matters too much to let it fade away. And if you are the one who has been sleepwalking, who has let busyness become an excuse and distraction become a habit, wake up. Look at the people you love, see them, really see them, pick up the phone, show up at the door. It is never ever too late to begin again. Love is remarkably resilient. It can survive long silences and cold birthdays, but it shouldn't have to. It thrives in the warmth of attention, in the light of simple presence. As for me, Anya, the mother, the grandmother, the woman, I have my life back. But it's a richer life than before. It holds both the peaceful solitude I cherish and the connected chaos I now welcome. The love I once feared was lost has returned, not as it was, but as it was meant to be, mature, forgiving, and free. The sun is setting now, casting long, golden shadows across this room. My phone is quiet on the table, but I am not waiting for it to ring. I am simply sitting in the contentment of a day lived and the quiet hope for tomorrow. I am no longer just a memory in my son's past. I am a living, loving part of his present. And that, my dear friends, is more than enough. It is everything.